Hello guys, and we are back with the benchmarking for the Quadro GV100 compared to the Titan V, which I've reviewed earlier. As you can see here, we have 32 gigabytes of VRAM, and here in the NVIDIA settings you can see Quadro GV100 32 gigabyte. And so let's start with comparing the performance in the viewport with the same amount of hair. As you remember, the Titan V had like roughly 10 frames per second, and then now let's have a look here. As you can see, it's pretty much identical, like the same chip, identical performance, nothing changes. But with this amount of hair, we already reached the limit. On the Titan V, we couldn't go beyond this. Pretty much we would run out of VRAM and the Maya session would crash. And now let's start to bump up the amount of hair gradually and then compare how the frame rate is and what is still acceptable. As I mentioned before, working in a 3D application, it's not a video game, right? So you don't need like 60 frames per second to have like a somewhat smooth experience. As you can see, when you tumble the viewport, you can still really well judge what you're working on, and even if you just have like 5 frames per second, it will still be appropriate. So we said that we have currently 4.8 million hairs, and now let's see how far we can go. So let's just start to increase the amount of hair for each hair system. Like, let's go 3, and then let's just do that for all of them, like sort of double the amount or whatever, or triple almost. The long hair is a bit buggy. Let's skip this one. Neck 4, and then tail 3. So now let's just generate the hair again and then see what we will get. I'm going to fast forward this so we can see it quicker. Okay, just finished. So now we are at 7.3 million hairs, and we are still getting 7.5 frames per second. So this is still really reasonable performance to work with, as you can see. And this is like already like 50% or more than 50% beyond what we had earlier. So I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna pump up the density even further, the amount of hairs, to see where we can go with this, and then generate the hair again. So I'm gonna fast forward this. Okay, now we are at 8.7 million hairs, and we are still getting out 6.7 FPS. So this is still really good to work with, and this is almost already twice as many hairs as the Titan V managed to display. So now I'm going to add even further hair and then see where we can push this. So 6.7 frames per second is really good still. A lot of hair, like already right now I have never seen this many hairs on screen before on any groom. So basically really we have like the entire amount of hair that we would have in the render on screen. So yeah, let me fast forward and then pump up the amount of hair even more. Okay, so here we are, 9.9 million hairs. And still the viewport performance is very, very reasonable. It's crazy actually, because I remember like just a few years ago, like in 2014, we had like a character with, I think, pretty much 10 million hairs, and then RenderMan 19 back then, I think, was like running out of RAM during rendering, and we had to reduce it in the final render quality basically. And here we can like already preview it like pretty much in real time. It's really, really, really impressive. I think we can definitely like push further, like until we reach like 2 frames per second, I would say. So now we are at 6 frames per second still. Solid 6 frames per second. Okay, I'll fast forward and bump up the density even further. So while it's generating the hair, I totally forgot to mention like how much memory we are right now using. So right now we're at 17 gigabyte of VRAM with 9.9 million hairs. So this is just a little bit over the half of the VRAM that this card has. So yeah, so there's still like a lot of room, but obviously if we go even beyond this amount of hair, then we won't really have much interactivity at all. So let's see how much frames per second we will end up with this upgrade. Let me fast forward. So 11 million hairs and still pretty steady frame rates. It's crazy. So we still have room to further increase the hair count, because even with this frame rate, which varies between like 6 frames and 5.5 frames to even 7 frames per second. Unbelievable. So yeah, let me bump this up even further and fast forward. So now here we are at 12.3 million hairs. And we're still getting 5.5 to 5.5 frames per second. So this is basically already almost 3 times the amount of hair that we can display compared to the Titan V. And we're still getting a decent frame rate. So with this frame rate you can still work, you know, just for the purpose of like previewing your groom inside the viewport without having to render. This is like perfectly suitable. So we're almost at 3 times the hair count, but not quite, and we are at 20.5 gigabytes of RAM. So we have already filled up sort of 35%. So let me increase this further and then let's see what we get. I'll fast forward again. So here we are, 13.6 million hairs, and now we are at 4.6 frames per second. Still reasonable, still reasonable. Really can't complain. We could even keep on working in this performance. and we are at 22.4 gigabyte of VRAM. But I would like to push it one last time and see where we go. Let's pump it up quite a bit now. I'll fast forward. So now we are at gigantic 16.15 million hairs. And we are still getting 4 frames per second. So theoretically, even at this performance in the Viewport, we could really comfortably work. It's insane, actually. So I don't know, should I pump it up one more time? We should, right? Yeah, let's do that. So we're at 26 gigabyte VRAM used. I'll fast forward. So now here we are at 19.1 million hairs. That is literally almost, well, it's like 3 times, no, 4 times almost. No, it's literally 4 times the amount of the Titan V. 19.1 million hairs. And we're still getting, what? 3.3 frames per second? 4 frames per second? As you can see, you can still work in this performance as well. It's absolutely brainstaking. I think as a bonus I have to pump it up one very last time. Oh, actually, we won't be able to because we reached 30 gigabytes. Only 1.2 gigabytes left. So basically we managed to edge the entire, almost the entire 32 gigabytes of RAM, and we're still getting a reasonable performance you can use to work with. Incredible. So bottom line is the investment was absolutely worth it. I basically now have like pretty much no limitations of how much hair I want to use for my creatures, and still sort of work in a quite interactive performance. I mean, we are already at twice the amount of fur that I've ever seen in any fur creature on any VFX grooming task, and it's still running pretty much fluid in the Viewport. Not disappointed at all. So yeah, guys, so this is the Quadro GV100, NVIDIA's latest workstation grade graphics card for VFX artists and CAD application users. And yeah, if you're looking for something really special to boost your productivity while working with real-time graphics, like in the Viewport with like heavy viewport heavy viewport assets, and I can highly recommend it. So yeah, this is it. So see you guys next time.